Hey listeners, just want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. I look forward to hearing, seeing, and speaking to all of you in 2020. My name is Peter Sumpton, and you're listening to the Marketing Study Lab podcast, the podcast that gives you actionable marketing knowledge, getting you and your marketing in the best possible shape to be the driving force of your business for long-term success. From strategy and tactics to practical application, we've got it all covered. If you'd like to support the show, it'd be fantastic if you could leave a 5-star Apple Podcast review or get in touch, especially if you have a burning marketing question. I'd love to chat it through with you. Email me, peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. There's a link in the show notes if you can't be bothered searching on LinkedIn. So what are we going to learn, and who's on Marketing Study Lab today? So it's the last Marketing Study Lab podcast of the year before we hit 2020. Unreal. And what I wanted to do is just go back over 2019 and just some of the episodes that we have released and some of the guests that I'm so proud, so delighted and so honoured to have on this podcast. I can't feature every single guest I've had. It's over 50. I wish I could, because going through the list of everybody, it was just unreal. Like, I honestly don't know how I've narrowed it down to these, but these aren't the cream of the crop because everybody brought mega value last year. But these are just some little bits from interviews that I thought I should highlight again because it could be pivotal for your business and your growth and development through 2020. Links to the full-length episodes of each one that's featured in this episode are in the show notes. Enjoy. For every episode of Marketing Study Lab, I like to start with a bit of a funny opener, something just to get the ball rolling, relax the guest, and just have a bit of a chuckle, really. And the very first Marketing Study Lab of 2019 with Catherine Gladwin, who's just an amazing, amazing person and amazing virtual assistant, or VA. She probably gave the best answer to the question that I posed, which was, have you ever been on TV? And I'm afraid you're going to have to wait until the very end of this podcast to find out how can I do this without a spoiler? Basically, how much Catherine won when she was on telly.
I was on Deal or No Deal.
Okay.
About 11 years ago now, I sent in 40 application forms because I was determined to be on there. It was one at the time. It was one of the easiest game shows because you don't have to answer any questions other than what box number do you want.
That'd be, some people would struggle with that though.
Yeah, I think so. So it suited me. So I was determined to get on there. So I sent 40 applications and eventually had an audition. Yeah,
an audition. What did you do in the audition?
You had to do a piece to camera and just tell them about yourself. I remember giggling a lot, I think, through nerves and getting very excited by it all that I'd got that far.
Okay, well, biggest question of the day then.
Yeah.
Did you get to be the main contestant?
Yes, everybody does.
Oh, right, cool. Didn't know that. And how much did you win?
I'll tell you at the end.
Oh, boo. Okay, well, people will have to listen till the end then. I'll fast forward it, but please don't do that because this will be really engaging. This next snippet is from episode 49 with Nicole Osborne, who is a social media and personal branding coach and digital marketing trainer from Lollipop Social. And what Nicole does is she takes us through her step-by-step process for creating a social media strategy.
Mm-hmm. Great. So creating a social media strategy. Now, this is often like how long is a piece of string? It's sometimes really is affected by the amount of budget you have available to do it and the amount of time to do it. But there's some sort of key steps. And if I may just briefly sort of talk you through a few of them.
Absolutely.
So first of all, the first step, and I touched on this earlier, is really about understanding the needs of your business. What do you want to achieve on social? Who do you want to reach? And also, how does your sort of current social media marketing fit into your overall marketing strategy? So first of all, you understand the needs of your business. Then I would strongly recommend you create user personas to really decide which of the platforms available are the best ones for you to reach your target audience and to help you meet your objectives. Then you would develop a bespoke strategy for each of those platforms, because each of them will be a little bit different. A strategy really that delivers results and can sort of become a key pillar of your overall marketing strategy. Because I think the most important thing with social, in my mind, is that it has to be integrated across the different marketing strategies you use. So we've developed a bespoke strategy. Part of this, we'll have to have really clear and measurable metrics, because we want to know, is our strategy working? And that's the beauty with social. You find out so quickly whether something is working or not. Then I would say, you really have to set up your platforms to really optimize the existing ones, whether that's really having an on-brand winning profile description, using really good on-brand pictures, having the right links to your website, having a branded hashtags, and really optimizing the call to action. So then for me, the sixth step, and everyone will do this in slightly different order, but for a small business, I would say then the sixth step is really about finding the key influencers in your sector that complement your brand, that complement your message, and that will really help you to broaden your message when you start engaging with them and nurturing relationships with them. And then the whole process of optimizing your platforms continues. And then I would say, so once you know exactly which platform you're on, who the influencers, what is your audience like, that's when I would really sit back and develop a content strategy that really speaks to your audience and is totally on brand for you. And I would do this quite late in the process, because I believe it's not right to jump into that right away. You need to sort of know from a strategic level which channels are right and what does my audience want. So you create a content strategy, because what we don't want is that you just set out and deliver your strategy and then you have no content to deliver. And here it's really important to note that the word social and social media strategy is so important. So it's a bit like going to a party. You can't just be the most boring guest where you just talk about yourself all the time. You have to share content from other respectable sources which will complement you, and you really have to also engage with your audience, and your content strategy that should come out. I like cake, so I always like to think of it as a piece of cake. So let's say if it's chocolate cake, I have like 10 different slices. What content areas are each of those? And then for each of them you would find some influencers and also your own content you can bring in. And then for me, it's all really about testing, measuring, reflecting, refining. Because that's the beauty of social media, is that actually you don't have to invest all that much up front, and you can learn rather quickly what's working and what's not working so well. So yes, so in essence, I think I've taken you through about 9 sort of steps. I think people will sometimes do them in different ways and invest different levels of time at different stages. But yeah, I would say following those steps will work.
In episode 77, we spoke to Patrick Ward. And one question that I posed him was that for a future marketer, are we looking at something more horizontal in terms of the skills they need right across the board in all disciplines? Or do we need to go narrow and deep and just focus on one core skill? What's the answer? Fortunately, Patrick has an answer.
I think it certainly is more of the horizontal, while I have the bedrock of what I say is I've got one primary marketing skill, which is my writing, but I've got enough graphic design, enough web development, enough email, social, paid, like Google AdWords. I've got enough of those skills to do them to a reasonably proficient level. I would not by any I would never say you should hire me exclusively for that, because, a company, quite frankly, if they just hired me for those skills, would be disappointed. But nevertheless, it does give me a holistic view. So I think it is important to be horizontal, but still find that one thing that you're so good at it that when people look at that, whatever that work is, that they go, yep, that's my guy. Like, this person is just going to crush it when it comes to that. Because then everything, all the other secondary things are just like a nice add-on, right? But then they're not the primary purpose. And I think that's really what we're seeing in marketing roles now is no one wants just mediocre. People want excellence.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I truly believe that everyone has an ability to be excellent at something. There is something, in every grad, there is something right now that you can do so effortlessly because it is so intrinsic to you.
This next snippet is from a Marketing Study Lab special episode with Ryan Foland. And Ryan so kindly took us through his 313 challenge, which I'm in the middle of, and I advise anyone to do it because it gives you clarity on what your core skill is, the problems you solve, and the solutions you have. Not just talking about what job you do, but the problems you actually solve. So Ryan, please explain the 313 challenge for the listeners.
So at the end of the day, it's based on a premise that nobody actually cares what you do. And that's where you have to start, because you might feel like people care what you do because our entire life has been, Ryan, what do you want to do when you grow up? And when you get to college, what major do you want? What job do you want? Everything's focused on what you do. But in reality, I argue that people don't care what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they care about the problem that you solve. And we all have problems, and we all need different problems solved. So inherently, you're not going to have to solve everybody's problem because you're not for everyone. And so once you're okay with that as a foundation, then you can understand the value of being able to explain the problem that you solve without saying what you do. Because if you can get that as a core concept, the next time somebody asks you what you do, you're like, it doesn't really matter what I do. What matters is the problem that I solve. Now they're going to ask you, what problem do you solve? And now you can filter through the other information. And the 313 stands for your ability to explain what you do in 3 sentences, 1 sentence, and ultimately 3 words. And it's really a core messaging to make a decision on what is the one problem that you solve. What is your one solution? And who is the target market that needs you? And do not confuse simple with easy. And you can attest to this. It's just mind-boggling when you have to put yourself into this little box. You're like, no, but I do this. No. From a communication standpoint, when you are tactical about the way that you explain what you do in terms of the problem that you solve, it gets people interested in what you do in a way that you can't necessarily originate otherwise. And if you have a business, or if you are an employee, or if you're a manager, our whole life is selling these different ideas or what we're trying to do. But if you reverse engineer and just focus on the problem, the solution, the market in a particular way, it gives you an arsenal or a tool. You're in like a video game like Fortnite, and you have all these different weapons that you've got strapped, and like at a push of a button, you can say what you do in a sentence, and then comes over and it's hand-to-hand combat, and you're talking about think of me as this of this.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it's a challenge. And in fact, I have a podcast called the 313 Challenge, where I work people through this process. Simple questions with very difficult answers. But once you answer them, you're like, there it is. That's it right there. And so in the book, we talk about how, from a branding standpoint, people don't really care that you're a speaker, but they care about the problem that you solve while you're speaking. And so by teasing that out and being able to get that core communication down, like, you just all of a sudden become free of that scramble when somebody asks you what you do, and you're like, but no, I didn't say that. You go home and you're like, so it gives you some bumpers in the bowling lane when it comes to trying to strike out in the conversations that you have.
In episode 57, I was delighted to invite Timbo Reed from the Small Business Big Marketing podcast on. And the reason I was delighted to is because that's partly the reason I started podcasting, is Tim's own podcast. It was something I found engaging, insightful, informative. Check it out if you haven't already. Subscribe, please subscribe. It's well worth it. He has some amazing guests. But what I spoke to Tim about was how he actually got into podcasting. Was it the same as me? How long ago was it? And what drew him to this amazing media we all love?
Look, I fell into it. So how I fell into podcasting story is this. I had been doing some work. This is about 12 years ago. I was working at a charity in Melbourne, Australia, called Reach, and Reach helps young people at risk. That was the nature of their business, of their cause. I was there as in a business capacity, helping them out, and I would also very informally, very casually, just mentor some of the young people that were coming through the program. One of those young people went on to become a pretty well-known radio producer who produced and still does produced one of the most successful radio programs in Australia. His name's Sam, and about 11 years ago, I said to Sam, I discovered this thing called podcasting. It was actually a show called Killer Innovations, put together by the Vice President of Innovation at Hewlett-Packard in California, a guy called Phil McKinney. And I'd found this podcast on the internet that I could listen to on my phone anytime I wanted, as often as I wanted, for free. And it was like, this is about a topic that I was interested in. And I thought, this is mind-blowing. So I rang Sam up and I said, Sam, I found this thing called podcasting, and it excites me on many levels. It means that I could possibly have my own show. It means that as a marketer, I could help other business owners get their own show. And it's a wonderful way to build profile and influence. And he said anytime you want to use the studios at the radio station he was working at, he would, because I'd helped him out, he would return the favour. So I took him up on that offer. I didn't know what I was going to do. I rang a mate, Luke, who became my co-host for the first 80 episodes. I rang him and said, Lukey, we've got this opportunity to create a show in a real radio studio. And he said, well, let's do it. And that's how the show was born. Now, I don't tell that story very often, Pete, because I don't want anyone listening to think that in order to start a podcast, you need a flash radio studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't. You need a smartphone and a quiet space.
Yeah.
And you're underway. You know, I don't know where you are right now, but I'm guessing maybe a home office.
Yep.
Maybe your lounge room. Yeah, is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And my setup now is a little bit different to when I started. This podcast's only been going for a year, but the setup is a little bit different, and you just invest as you go on, and you get more interested in it. And like you say, you just don't need any of that just to start. Just start.
No. To start. So, and that's what I did. And then one thing led to another. You get better at what you're doing. I'd go back to episode 1 of the Small Business Big Marketing Show, and I'd sort of cringe. I'm not going to be, I'm not so humble as to say it was terrible, but it was, you just get better. And you know that the first few are going to be a bit awful, and you improve. And what happens is that, again, my podcast and your podcast too, Pete, is an example of the boomerang effect in action. You are being helpful in your marketing, and amazing things happen as a result of that. You don't know sometimes what. Primarily, you hope that you get more clients, right, and more of the right clients. But for me, other things happened. I have spoken at probably 500 conferences in 10 countries in the last 10 years as a result of my podcast. I have emceed some really big award shows in Australia as a result of my podcast. I've had a radio program for a couple of years as a result of my podcast. So I just think it's amazing when you are helpful in your marketing, and when you really do put in, amazing things come back in return.
In episode 59, I spoke to James Perry, my mate from Ireland, and it was the first Marketing Study Lab video episode that we did. And James really helps people pass their accountancy exams. He's brilliant at what he does, and there's so many synergies between what we do in terms of gaining marketing qualifications and what people do to gain their accountancy qualifications. So one question I wanted to know is that focusing, understanding and highlighting real life examples, not just in exam situations, but in real life as well, to help you highlight key points and elements that we need to do in business. Are they appropriate or are they just a waste of time?
Yeah. So the exams are whatever it will be in a fictitious scenario.
Yeah.
So you'll have your fictitious company in the body of the question. And this is a key thing that I tell my students that are going from foundational exams to professional exams. Professional exams are called professional for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching you to become professional. And people tend to forget that. So how I encompass that would use the word advisor. You're going to become a trusted advisor, and that's what these professional exams are going to do. So you're quite right. In your approach, you give an introduction, you give an argument, you talk about your theory, you talk about your application, but then you have to actually specifically address it to the body of the question, to the company, to the board of directors, to the personalities involved. What's the geographical location? What's the name of the product? You're quite right. You have to. That's the next step to become an advisor. Because whenever you're in work, you're not just going to be writing pages and pages of theory. You have to actually. You're going to answer problems. You're a problem solver for your client. So therefore, it applies just as much in terms of accounting.
Okay.
But definitely right. You have to address the people involved.
When Michael Field joined us on episode 67, it was amazing to chat to him about the difference between B2B and B2C strategies, because there are a lot of synergies, but there are a lot of differences, and some people combine them together. But I think that's incorrect, and I was so keen to understand what Michael thought of this whole ethos and whether it is the same, it's different, the similarities, or are they just complete polar opposites? So, Michael, what can you tell us?
Sure. Look, there are many people who would argue different ways around it. Some people say, there is no B2B or B2C, it's all P2P, it's all person to person or something like that. But I would argue quite strongly that B2B is a very different marketplace from B2C. The expectation from the customer that you've got a much more sophisticated business case rationale as to why your product is superior to the competitors, over and above emotional or brand reasons, is essential to create any success for a business. I said somewhat tongue in cheek earlier, a warehouse manager who's speccing out 15 forklifts needs a business case. They need to know that you understand deeply the business problems that they're experiencing. You need to know everything about inventory and logistics and dispatch and exactly how those forklifts are going to be used. And you need to be willing to have a much longer sales cycle or sales conversation with that person over a protracted period. And you need to be willing to negotiate with multiple parts of the business. Although the order might come from the warehouse manager or procurement, there's probably 15 or 20 people who would be influencing that decision, from the user, the forklift operator, the OH&S guy, various people in that business who are going to have a view as to what capital equipment they want in the business. And B2B marketers and B2B salespeople need to be willing to understand that landscape, be expert in it, and invest in that much longer term conversation that, look, frankly, can't be sold in a 30-second TVC or a cutesy point of sale.
And finally, back to episode 41 with Catherine Gladwin. And I know you're all waiting to know if Catherine won any money on Deal or No Deal. So Catherine, to finish the final episode of 2019, because you so kindly started 2019 from episode 41 back in January, the day before your birthday as well. Wow. Happy birthday for like a week's time, by the way. Did you win any money? And did you meet Noel Edmonds? And if you fast forwarded to this point, nice one. But rewind and listen.
Up.
Oh, you there?
No, not really. I'm just trying to get away with the amount.
Right, I'm leaving that in as well. You've been on TV, Deal or No Deal. How much did you win?
I won £21,000.
Oh, congratulations. What were the two boxes? Can you remember?
I had £1 in my box.
Oh.
and I think the other box was 100,000. I know that the next 3 offers after I took the 21 were all more money.
Right. Oh,
So,
yeah, but who cares?
but hindsight, isn't it?
Well, it is, but who cares? 21, it's not bad. For
Very
standing
nice.
and opening a box.
Yeah.
But I mean, you do have to hug Noel Edmonds, so.
He was quite fit.
Oh, I mean.
Yeah.
The gnome look does it for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Noel. I know he's an avid listener. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.